did you have a source of inspiration to join the Marine Corps?
That's a great question. So, uh, yes and no.
Okay.
So let me start off with the yes part. Growing up, um, everyone that was in my grandparents' generation had fought in World War II. So, people who were like in their 50s and 60s were very much around. They would talk about their experiences. So my grandfather, who I'm named after, was an infantryman in World War II with the U.S. Army. He was wounded pretty badly, and came back and then became a lawyer. So certainly I grew up with those stories. I grew up with stories in my family about people, great uncles or grandfathers who fought in the Civil War. Not even necessarily like knowing who they were, but it sort of come down through the family history. That said, I had no real desire to join the military. I just figured I probably wouldn't. If war came up, go, but otherwise I probably wouldn't. And in high school, I was exposed to some teachers who were veterans, and they shared their stories, and I thought that was interesting. And then one day I was in college, and I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I think I'd sort of fallen into the mindset of, well, military is great, but I never want to be in a position where I'm, being ordered to take a hill, and I died for no good reason. Sort of like, I'm too valuable for that kind of stuff. And I was talking to my buddy who was my classmate who was going through ROTC. And he's like, right, you just let somebody else's kid go off. And it stuck with me. And I thought about it. I was like, what? That's damn right. I've got sort of a bad mindset. And around the same time that happened, a Marine Corps recruiter dropped off a poster about officer candidate school, and on campus. And this wasn't like ROTC. This was something where it was like, look, in the summer, you go through basic training for 10 weeks. If you survive our program at the end of college, if you graduate, you can be commissioned as an officer and we'll go active duty. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool. The Marines, unlike ROTC, like some of the other branches, which were offering money or opportunities like this, the Marine Corps basically had the attitude of, maybe you can be one of us, and maybe you can't, and you think you're tough enough to try, and that just really appealed to me. And I don't know why, but it did, and I went, and that's how I got in.
That's pretty cool. How long did you serve? Did you say 3?
Yeah, so it's an 8-year contract when you're an officer, but 4 years of that are active, and 4 years you're in something called the inactive ready reserve.
Okay.
Which means if something goes wrong, like we go to war with Iraq or Afghanistan, they can call you back from civilian life even after you've filled your 4-year obligation. I did 4.5 years active duty. Got out, went to law school, and fully expected that they would call me back. They didn't. And so at the end of the 8 years, I got my honorable discharge in the mail, and that was it.
Gotcha. What was your first assignment like? Do you have any special memories from that moment?
So my first exposure to the Marine Corps was an officer candidate school, and the first experience with that is, you spend a couple days checking in. You're carrying your bags with you, but then they turn you over to your drill instructors who will mold you. And so the first experience at OCS was you're sitting there, and then suddenly these sergeant instructors turn around and just start yelling at you, and right in your face. So that was kind of culture shock, and certainly a lot of OCS was. I think if you Google any video about Marine Corps indoc training or officer training, there are videos of that moment happening where the sergeant instructors come in, they are told to go and do their duty by the commanding officer, and they salute, and then they turn around and they just come alive. But outside of training, and I went through a lot of training, because with Marine officers, you go through 10 weeks of officer candidate school. Once you get through that, if you get through that, because we had a lot of people who did not, you then get assigned to 6 months of follow-on officer training at the basic school, where where you learn how to do a variety of other things, and then you go on to your military occupational school, where you learn how to do your particular field. Once I hit the fleet, when I was actually with the deploying unit, I think the most meaningful experience I had was while we were on deployment, and the elections were going on in the former Yugoslavia. And these were the elections with Milosevic. It looked like Milosevic was going to probably try to do something because that's what he usually had done in the past.
Yeah.
And we watched his own people overthrown. And, we were sort of sitting there waiting to see if something was going to turn violent. It did not. But we were sort of expecting that it could. And that was an exciting moment because you felt like you were part of a real world experience because you were, and that you were in a position where you sort of knew what was happening almost before the rest of the world did. And that was neat.
Yeah, that is cool. Were you part of any wars?
So I'm not a combat vet. I was never shot at in anger. I deployed again to Yugoslavia right after the Kosovo Air War in '99, when the United States was still, doing stuff in peacekeeping missions in Bosnia and Kosovo. We were doing stuff in the area, protecting no-fly zone. So technically, that's a combat zone. I didn't have to pay taxes as long as I was floating on a boat in that little combat area. But I have not had the experience of being shot at or watching people, I know and care about get shot next to me.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons, again, why I'm hoping my buddy can come in and talk to the sections as a whole, because his experience is as a combat veteran.
Got you. My next question is, how did you stay in contact with your family? Did you feel like you had enough opportunity?
Yeah. So this is neat because it was I was sort of in the transition period between when the only way you get stuff home was through mail. So, the mail would arrive by helicopter. You'd get your mail from your family, and you'd send mail back. We had begun to get internet when I was deployed, and we could actually email. And what that meant was, wow, look at that! I can email a letter every day, and I can get email responses every day, and that was really how I stayed in touch, and it was great.
Got you.
There was no phone connectivity to speak of. No one. People had cell phones, but they stopped working the minute you were deployed. So this is 2000. This was well before the iPhone, even before that cool little flip phone thing came out. It was that wasn't really working much. So that was what we were limited to, and we thought we were damn lucky. And certainly people at this point were like, you guys have no idea how lucky you have. You get to email. We would be lucky if we got mail once a week and were able to use the phone. Phone calls were fewer and far between, but you could technically do it. And we did it occasionally. I wanted to set a good example. I figured as long as my Marines didn't have the ability to call home a lot, I shouldn't either. So I stuck mostly to email.
Got you. So I guess when you were there, you felt like you had a good enough opportunity, I guess, to stay in contact, other than the phones.
Yeah. Now there were times when we were deployed and we actually thought we were about to go operational. The internet shut down.
Okay.
And then no one heard from us for about 15 days.
Okay.
And that was just the way it was. So
okay.
Again, I think things have changed slightly. I think there's a lot more communication now and opportunities for deployed troops to communicate back home, almost like they can pick up the phone and FaceTime. That's not anything I assume Zoom technology now is available.
Yeah.
So a lot more opportunities to connect that way than there ever would have been dreamed possible when I deployed.
So my next question is, what was the food like for you?
Well, so again, the Marine Corps, you don't expect much. So, you get used to really crappy food. Being on board the ship, the food wasn't bad. It was, every now you'd see a box labeled grade F, but edible. It was definitely a lowest common bidder. But look, when we were on the ship, I was, part of the officers' mess. The food is pretty good. Friday was frozen. It was fried shrimp day. I love fried shrimp day. That was really good. The Navy coffee I thought sucked. That was pretty lousy. Um, but look, I after about the week when the fresh milk turned into sort of like dry and rehydrated milk, I wasn't a big fan of that. But this is really, minor stuff. When we were on the ship, I certainly felt well fed. There was plenty of opportunity to eat. When I was in the field,
Hmm.
you ate what you could get. I thought the Marine um, uh, expeditionary cooks that came ashore usually gave us hot food of some variety that was good.
Hmm.
Um, the When you were stuck with a meal ready to eat, those weren't bad either. You tried to avoid certain ones. You probably traded people for things that if you didn't want the cheese dip and you wanted the peanut butter, you could usually make that trade. But the food was fine.
Okay.
And then when we weren't in the field and we weren't on the ship, if we were in a port call, the food was great. You'd go out, you'd take your money, and you'd buy. God, I remember having tapas in Spain and paella, and you hit the Italian ports. I mean, anything in Italy.
Is
Oh
good.
my God, it was incredible. So no complaints on the food at all.
Okay. My next question is, how did you like cope with like the stress of your work? Like, did you have something? Just like a coping mechanism?
Everyone's in it together, so I think that made it easier.
Okay.
Also, the Marine Corps, or at least my unit, but I think it's probably Marine Corps just generally. We
Mhm.
all have a dark sense of humor.
Okay.
So you'd do pranks. You'd sort of laugh things off as much as you could. You'd work out.
Mhm.
I'd go up to the flight deck and run around on the flight deck for a while. We had a workout room. You watch movies, you read. When things are really high stress,
Mhm.
you really haven't got time to even focus on the stress. You just get the job done. So the time to deal with stress release would have been when we hit port or when the crisis had passed. Certainly, you'd go out with your buddies and
Mhm.
find a bar. And most of the officers. So as a general rule, there was rules against fraternization. So I wouldn't take my junior enlisted out and say, "Hey, let's all go drinking together." That's not my job. It'd be like going out, teacher and student, and saying, "Hey, let's go party." It's not okay. But the officers I hung out with were mostly like me. We were fairly young. Most of us were married. And so the amount of trouble that we wanted to get into typically was I want to sit at a bar and drink ridiculous amounts of Guinness and then stumble back to the ship.
Okay.
And that's about as bad behavior as we got.
Okay.
So some drunken hijinks. But even that, you had to be a little bit restrained on. So it would be, because you still have to, project leadership qualities. So, but we would take care of each other, and if one of us had too much, we'd make sure the other one got back on board the ship and was fine.
Okay. So my next question is, since we've been talking about POWs so much, I think you said you've personally never been one, but do you know like someone who has been, and did they ever tell you what that was like?
So let me, prisoner of war. Give me 1 second. I just have to blow my nose a little bit.
Okay.
Pardon me.
You're good.
So, so let me talk about my experience with that. So I was a intelligence officer for a helicopter squadron, which means I was in charge of briefing pilots and helping operational planners figure out enemy forces. But I also served as a collateral duty, was in charge of preparing air crews for what would happen in the event that they were shot down and what they would need to do to evade capture, and if captured, what they do to resist interrogation. So I went through a training program called SEER,
Yeah.
Survival Evasion Resistance Escape School, where you go through sort of a mock prisoner of war experience, which was and a mock prisoner of war experience where the detaining power isn't necessarily a Geneva Convention supporter.
Okay.
So that training was very eye-opening and it helped me brief my guys. The overall feeling, you have is it's a loss of control. It's a loss of everything. So you try to figure out ways to maintain your thoughts and sort of come back to what you can. But in to answer your other question, yes, I did know some people who had been prisoners of war. I've met a couple who were like prisoners of war during World War II. I think I've met one or two who were prisoners of Japanese back when I was, young teenager.
Okay.
Their experience was awful. They were like survivors of the Bataan Death March, and or some of the camps that were over there. I also, when I was still in the Marines, there was a local guy named Guy Hunter who had been shot down in the first days of the first Gulf War and was a prisoner of war of the Iraqis. And he came in and talked about his experiences. I also have met a couple of people who had been kidnapped by terrorist groups, like the FARC in Colombia. And they talked about their experiences as well, sort of in a classroom setting, but I had that experience talked about. Uniformly, the experiences were, for Guy Hunter, because look, interrogation, there really wasn't much interrogation. They just beat us. They'd come in, they'd beat us, they'd be unpleasant with us. And then, their questions were kind of dumb. You could pretty easily resist. Resist telling them anything useful because they're, the as I remember the World War II prisoners of war talked about how the Japanese basically starved them and would beat them. And the guy who was taken by the FARC just basically said, every day you woke up and you wondered if they were going to kill you. So I don't know. Is that answer?
Yeah, that definitely does. Did you ever have like a good luck ritual or something before you went out?
That's a good question. Not really. I think the night before any major deployment, where I knew I was going to be gone for a while, I would typically go down to, there was this great local restaurant near where I lived. And I would sit at the bar and I'd have a Guinness and usually a plate of shrimp and grits or something like that, whatever their special was. And I'd sort of sit there and just say, okay, for the next 45 minutes to an hour, it's just going to be about me sipping this beer, eating this food, and off we go. And it was something to look forward to when I got back to. I wouldn't say it was a good luck ritual, but it was something that I just sort of felt like that's something I want.
Okay, that's cool. So, what was your relationship with your fellow colleagues? I know you talked a little bit about how you guys shared the same interests, but what else did you guys do together, pretty much?
Again, when we were on deployment, we were living with each other all the time. I lived in a very small room on the ship with three other guys, and four bunk beds, and that's because we were officers. We had a spacious berth. If we'd been enlisted, we'd been downstairs in the enlisted berths where it's multiple racks just as far as you can see. So we again, you'd I think Marines are kind of culty anyway, and I mean that in a good sense. We just knew we had each other's backs. So again, we would do what anybody normal roommates would do. Plus, basically it's a roommate experience, except we're all in the military. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a record of your experiences? Did you ever keep a journal or a diary?
No. I've got emails, I've got mementos, I've got things scattered here and there, but no formal record, and I get day to day. I probably felt like the emails home effectively did that, but I'm not sure if I've got those anymore. I've got again, my you've got your photos from deployment, you've got things like that, but that's pretty much it.
Okay. How did like your service like affect your life? Like, did it change your character like post like you were coming back?
Yeah, I think it's one of those experiences where look, it certainly changed me, and it changed me for the better.
Mm-hmm.
I it's a very real world job. You have real responsibility coming right out of the gate. The issues you're dealing with really are life and death. You screw up in the corporate world, you can lose people's money. You can cause damage.
Mm-hmm.
You can lose your job. At the end of the day, though, pretty much everyone's going home alive.
True.
You screw up as a Marine, someone's going to die, or someone easily could. And so, I mean, I think that responsibility was really useful. I think it taught me some basic leadership qualities that I think have served me well. Further on as a lawyer, as a law school, just as dealing with people generally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the experience has probably made me a sadder person as well on some front, because even though I wasn't in combat, even peacetime Marine Corps, you lost friends. I had one friend who was killed in a plane crash during training. I had, another who yeah. I've lost a variety of friends along the way, as because they're in the Marines, and this is what happens. One of my friends that I went through OCS with, was killed in Iraq, and I remember him vividly, and a sniper got him. So it's those experiences set you apart from the rest of the country and society, who for the most part hasn't had those experiences, and no reason they should have. But
True.
we're largely insulated from it. Unless you live down near a base,
Mm-hmm.
there's no indication where I'm living right now in Massachusetts that there are U.S. forces involved in two major conflicts. Really nothing. So it sets you apart that way, and it's great. I think everyone generally supports the troops, and that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's a different experience.
Okay. What was like your most memorable experience? Do you have like one in particular?
Um, Probably that period we were deployed and really looking off of Yugoslavia again is the most meaningful one.
Okay.
But there were a lot of really great experiences.
Okay. My next question is, did you have like any ambitions like after you came back that you wanted to like pursue, and how did you like do like that?
I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and I went to law school, and
Mm-hmm.
I got into law school. I was still on active duty, and set up the time to go to when active duty expired. So I think it sort of it probably made me a little bit more diligent, a little bit more professional. But no, I mean that's those the ambition was I wanted to be a lawyer. So.
Okay. So would you say like it wasn't really that much of a challenge for you to like transform back to like civil life, or was it?
No, I'd say it was it was actually a little challenging, because I went from an environment where I had responsibility for 10 to 15 Marines directly.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with issues of kind of global importance, even though your unit may be a small scale of it, you're dealing with big issues. I had a young family at that point. To transition from that to law school, where my colleagues, for the most part, highly intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
but still, for the most part, right out of college, and their big discussion is what bars they wanted to go and bar hop. Um, it was a transition, and suddenly not being in charge of really anything but myself and studying was a transition. Growing out my hair was a tradition. It's and then just getting used to how civilian life is, and there's a lot of great qualities to it. But I think there was definitely a little bit of a transition. Sort of, in some respects, it almost felt like I had regressed a little bit by going back to law school.
Okay.
Marine Corps gave me a lot of leadership experience right off the bat. It made me think about the mission and my Marines first. It made you figure out how to deal with stress.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I think that the Marines say a lot of is, stress, how you react to stress is ultimately on you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lot of things can be going wrong. A lot of things can feel overwhelming, but how you react to it is entirely
On you.
under your control. So, I think they were very good at that.
Okay.
And those are things I've sort of taken with me.
Okay. Finally, anything else you'd like to share with me?
I don't think the military is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a fantastic experience, and I can't think of a better experience for a first professional job. I think I'm very, I love my time in the Marine Corps. I do not regret it for a second. I feel privileged to have been on active duty, and I will always feel a kinship with the Marines. I think, I don't think the military is for everybody, but I think some sort of larger than yourself national form of service as a first professional career is fantastic. With a Corps, the military, something that that forces people to have sort of a larger view and get a sense of the world that's out there. So it's not that there weren't tough days. It's not that there weren't days where I wanted out. There are always those days. Some days you're just bored. Mm-hmm. Some days the excitement was palpable. I'm very privileged and honored to have had the experience to have been a Marine officer.
Okay, thank you. That was really good insight. Was the Professor Ryan? Was he also part of the military at some point?
He was. He was a Marine as well.
Okay.
And was also an officer, and then he went in and was as a Marine lawyer.
Okay.
So, yeah. So if you'd like to talk to him as well, you should definitely send him an email. I'm sure he'll talk to you about it.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Can I share this conversation? Can I put it up on my website?
So yeah, I that's fine. Okay. I guess what I'd like to do, just because I have clients Google me and stuff like that. If you want to mind, just you have to be Franklin S or something like that. I'd like to keep some anonymity there. Sure. Just because, again, I never know who's Googling my name for career purposes.
True. So, yeah. That's usually I've heard are you okay with just me saying your last name, or do you want your first name?
I would if it were Smith. Unfortunately, with Schwartzer, there are about 3 people in the entire country with that last name.
Okay, so I'll just use your first name.
Yeah, okay. Franklin S.
Okay.
Be fine.
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Have a good 4th of July weekend.
You too. You doing anything fun?
No, just sitting at home doing the reading.
Are there going to be any fireworks or anything like that in the area?
I think so, yeah, my neighborhood. Not me personally, but I think, yeah, house is closed next to me.
Well, listen, have a great 4th.
You too.
Take care.
You too. Bye. Thank you. Bye.